set attribute, and let's set the ID, and then let's come over, and the value that we want to set for this is paragraph. That's how easy it is to set that attribute. We're then going to also be able to change the inner HTML on this. Inner HTML equal to, and then let's just go and grab some nonsense text here. Let's just grab this guy right here, throw that inside of there. And then if we want to append this new element that we just created to the sample div that we already have here, we can just go append child and then throw in paragraph 3, the new element that we just created, and you're going to see it shows up right there. There it is. We could also come in here and do a similar thing. Just go sample div 3 again. And if we want to insert it in a specific place, we would go insert before, and then we go paragraph 3, and we're going to say exactly where we want it to go. So it goes sample div 2 and child nodes, put it in there in the very first position. And if we rewind that, you can see it pops right inside of there. So that's how we can put in different child elements or create different elements, and a whole bunch of information in regards to how we can manipulate the DOM. Now I'm going to take a look at object-oriented JavaScript. Now, the idea behind object-oriented programming is we're trying to model the attributes and the capabilities of real-world objects directly inside of our code. So let's say we want to create one here, and it's going to be called customer 1. Well, what we're going to do first is define the attributes for this customer. And so let's say John Smith is an attribute for the name, and then we can also go and get the street and the city and the state and the email and a balance. Okay, so these are different attributes that customer 1 has. It has a name, street, city, and all those other different things. Now that brings us to the capabilities. One of the capabilities that our customer will have is to pay down their balance. And in JavaScript, this is exactly how you would create that said function, and it's going to get passed an amount that was paid to pay down the balance. And then to refer to the object itself, we would say this in this situation, and then we could subtract and assign back to the value of balance, which is balance, it's referring to this right here, whatever the amount paid was. So that's how easy it is to go in and create functions inside of JavaScript. Another thing we could do is add to balance. And once again, we're just going to create a function directly inside of here. I'm going to show you a couple other different ways we can do this here in a moment. And in this situation, we'll do the absolute opposite, which means the balance, and let's add to the balance whatever the amount charged was that was passed into that. So that's how we define the attributes for our objects, as well as how we would define the capabilities or functions for our object. And you just want to make sure you separate all those with a comma. And then finally, after the object has been completely defined, put a semicolon after the curly bracket. Now we're going to be able to come in here and actually get the values that are stored inside of here. So let's just document right again, and we'll say something like that we want to get the customer name. And to get the customer name, we just refer to the object. So it's customer 1, like we have there, and a dot and name. And just like that, we can go and output that value on our screen. We can also come in and change a value just by going customer 1 again, and street like this equal to, and let's just say he moved to 215 Main Street. There you go. You just change that value. And if we wanted to go in here and print out the street, of course, we would just go and put street inside of here instead of name. We're also going to be able to come in and add properties to this. So let's say we wanted to add a new one. Well, we'll just type in our new one, which is going to be country in this situation. Say US, and then print that out on the screen. And of course, just refer to country. And we can also come in and delete different attributes. We'll just go customer 1, just refer to our object, and to whatever property we want to delete. Another thing we can do, I showed you this previously before when we were covering for loops. You could also be able to come in through here and cycle through all the different properties for our objects using the for in block. And we just say the object we want to work with, and then we could say something like if customer 1 has property, has own property, like that, well then we want to print it out on screen. So we'll go document right, and whatever the property is, and reload it, and you can see right there customer name and all that information, and then we cycle through all the different properties that are available for our object and printed those out on the screen. Another thing we could do is check if a property is in an object. So for example, we could check if there is a property called name inside of our object, and we would surround it with double quotes and then go in customer 1. That's how we would verify if it existed. And you can see it comes back as true. And we could also come in and interact with an object using a function. So let's say function and get info, for example. And this one's going to be past our customer. And then let's come in here and output all this information. There you can see I outputted the name, and it's basically going to come out as a sentence whenever we pass in an object into the getInfo function, and then call that function by going getInfo and passing in any object inside of it, and then output that on our screen. There you can see John Smith lives at, and there's all the information we have on John Smith and how it printed out right there. Now let's go in here and actually call the methods. Also very easy to do. Customer 1, and let's say the customer 1 decides he wants to pay down his balance. Well, he's going to pass in the amount that he wants to pay down on the balance, but then let's find out later on that he actually wants to buy something else and he wants to add to his balance. And why don't we just go in here and grab this guy again and paste that in there to show you exactly how that changed. And there you can see the new balance is $110. And that's all well and good, but very often what we want to do is want to create generic objects so that we can create many different objects rather than just deal with one object over and over again. Well, how we're going to be able to do that is with what is called an object constructor. And how you create one, you want to give your object a name, and it's normally going to be uppercase letters. And you're just going to define everything that's going to be passed inside of this object whenever it's created. So there you go. There's all the different things that we're going to need to create our custom customer object. Then we're just going to go this name, which refers to this object's name, and then we'll do exactly the same thing for all of the other different attributes or elements inside of here. You can see instead of being separated with commas, these are ending with a semicolon. We're also going to be able to come in here and create functions for this guy. So pay down balance, just like we had before, is equal to, and we're going to say function. Amount paid is going to be passed inside of it, and it's going to do the same exact thing. It's just going to change the balance for this, the amount paid, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing. Well, make sure you put a semicolon at the end of this. Then we're going to do exactly the same thing for adding to the balance. So add to balance, and then change this to amount charged. And then here we'll just go and do an addition in amount charged, and there we go. So that's how we create an object constructor. Now to create a customized object, we're just going to go variable, and let's just call this customer 2. We're going to go new, and we're going to call the name of the object we want to create. And then we'll just put all that information inside of there for our new customized customer object and put a semicolon at the end of it. And if we want to call the function for customer 2, we could do something like add to balance and go $15.50. And it's going to work in exactly the same way. And we're going to be able to call and output information for this customer object just like we did with the previous customer object. Now let's say that we wanted to have what are normally referred to as a static variable for our object, which is going to be a variable that's going to have a value that is going to be shared between every single object that is ever created for the customer type. How we would create that is by creating what is called a shared prototype property. So we could do something like, let's say we have all of these different customers that have been created, and just on a whim we want to give them the ability to use credit or to make a charge on account or hold a balance or whatever you want to call it. Well, we're going to go prototype, and then we're going to define whatever this shared value would be. So is credit available? And we're going to say that all of these customers have credit available by default. And then on one line, if we wanted to remove credit from all of them, we would just type in false, and then that would remain true. But let's give them all credit right now. And like I said, this is going to be a shared value for every single customer type. Now, if we have shared variables, it would also be nice to have shared functions. And to create one of those, we're just going to come in here, and this is actually referred to as a prototype method. Again, we're going to go customer, and then we're going to go prototype, and then we're going to give the name of the shared function, and then define this function. That's not going to get any attributes passed inside of it, and it's going to return all the information on our customer. And you can see right there that it returns all of those, and then at the very end of it we want to put a semicolon. Now what that's going to allow us to do is to go in here and go document write, and then just go customer 2, and toString is the guy we got there. And what I actually did is override the toString method that all objects have. This is how easy it is to override a method. You just do that, pretty simple. And if I reload it, you can see Sally Smith lives at 234 Main, and all of that information prints out on our screen. So that is a whole bunch of information on how to deal with objects inside of JavaScript. Now let's take a look at form validation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a whole bunch of inputs inside of here, and I'm going to validate whether they are good information or not good information. So I'm going to create a div here first off. Then inside of this div, I'm going to say something like enter your name. And then I'm going to go in here and create an input box. Let's give us a little bit of room because I'm going to make this a little bit complicated so that you learn some information here. I'm going to give this the ID equal to name. Let's go and give it name also. This, of course, is going to be a text input. Let's go and give it a size of 30 columns. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on blur, which means when they leave the input box, I want something to happen. You can leave it like that, or you can leave it like this, or you can do whatever you'd like. I'm going to say I want to call a function called isTheFieldEmpty. And I'm going to verify whether this field is empty or not. I'm going to pass in the element itself, the input element, using this in this situation. And then what I'm going to do is go document get element by ID, and this is going to be called name help. This is going to be a span we're going to create here in a second that is going to show an error message if we have something wrong with the input the user left. And I'm going to create that span right now. So span, give it an ID equal to name help, of course, just like we just mentioned here a second ago. And then I'm going to close this span right like that. And then the div closes. So what we got to do here is, just to review, whenever they leave the input text box after they entered something or didn't enter something, we're going to call a function called isTheFieldEmpty. We're going to pass in a reference to the input box itself that we're going to then verify if it indeed is empty, and we're also going to pass a reference to name help, which is this span that is going to show an error message if indeed the field is empty. We want to warn them and say, hey, we need this field in. Now this guy right here is actually going to go outside of the script area, so it's going to go right up here inside of the regular body. Then down inside of the script, I'm going to have to create some functions that are going to allow me to dig through this information. One of them is going to be called edit text, and what it's going to be passed is a regular expression that we're going to use to verify information in these different fields. And I'm sorry, but I can't go through regular expressions in this tutorial. It's just too much. I've already covered regular expressions already, and there's a regular expression tutorial on my YouTube channel, a couple of them actually, and there we go. So what the edit text is going to get passed is a regular expression to check, to verify that the information is valid. So is it a valid email address? Is it a valid telephone number? Whatever. It's also going to be passed whatever they typed into or didn't type into this input box up here. It's going to be passed the ID for this little helper span here, which is where we're going to put an error message if we need to. And it's also going to be passed a message that we would put inside of here. Okay, so those are the four things this function is going to be passed. Now to check to see if the regular expression is good or not, we're just going to go regex and test like that, and then pass in the input. You're going to see here in a second what this all looks like finished. Now in this situation, we need to come in here and actually add a warning because the regular expression did not match what we expect to be in the input box. So then what we want to do is we need to clear out the help ID if there's already an error message inside of it, and then add in a new one. So we're going to say help ID, and we're going to check if it's equal to null. Now what we're going to do is cycle through the help ID and the child nodes inside of it and delete every single child node that's already inside of there. So we're going to go help ID and remove, this is another way to remove a child, remove child, help ID, and we'll say child nodes. Alright, so we're going to cycle through all the possible child nodes that are already in the span called help ID and delete them. And then after we have possibly deleted every single one of those, we then want to also go in here and call help ID and append a new child message. And we're going to go document, create a new node, create text node, and pass in whatever the message is that they wanted us to display on the screen, and close that off with a semicolon. Else, if the regular expression did check out, we're going to do the same thing. We want to go for the help ID again, not equal to null, and we want to cycle through and remove all those different children elements. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get a while loop here and paste that while loop inside of there. It's going to delete all of them, except this time it's not going to append or add a new message that shows an error. Now what we need to do is create this new method called isTheFieldEmpty, or create this new function, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to pass all that information inside of it. So just go function isTheFieldEmpty, and we already know that it's going to be passed the input field that we're going to be checking with, as well as the ID for the helper span that's going to show an error message or not. And then we need to return or call the edit node text, pass in a regular expression, so return edit node text. There's a regular expression we would use to verify that the name is correct or not. We're also going to pass in the input field value, which is going to be checked against the regular expression, as I showed before. We're going to pass in the help ID so that it'll be able to go in there and actually, well, let's change this to ID with a, well, let's change this to lowercase. There that is, there that is. And then finally, we need to pass in a message that's going to display if they entered the wrong information. So enter a valid name like that. And if we reload this, you'll see enter your name, and let's say I leave nothing inside of there, and on blur I leave there. Oh, got a little bit of an error. I have to change the name of this. Edit node text, reload. Oh, got another little error here. Help ID is not defined. What it's saying right here is this needs to be changed to a lowercase d. Let's see if I have help ID anywhere like that again. Nope, everything else is perfect. Change that. Let's reload it, see if I got it right this time. In here, and I left, and you can see that the span has been given the error message right there. And I have a whole bunch of other different ways to check common forms like emails and telephone numbers and all that in the link inside of the description, so feel free to take a look at that. Now to finish everything up, I'm going to stop and take a look at exception handling. Now through exception handling, we're going to be able to catch and manage errors rather than crashing our whole entire program. And we're going to be able to do this by surrounding potential errors or code that could cause an error with a try block. So let's go and create an array here first, and let's just throw a whole bunch of fake people inside of here. Now what I want to do here is verify or make sure that they don't try to call for somebody outside of the array, call for an index that doesn't exist. One way I could do that is variable get customer equal to function, and then they're going to pass in the index that they want to search for, they want to get information for. I can then go if index is greater than the customer array length. Well, in that situation, I want to throw an error. So throw a new range error, for example, and then pass in a message that I want displayed be greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to. And then just to make this work for a whole bunch of different things, we can go plus customer array length, and that's going to be an error that's going to be thrown whenever they try to access an index that doesn't exist. Else, in a situation in which they try to access something that does exist, I'm going to just say return customer array and the index. Now what I can do is jump down here and create the try block that I told you about a second ago. We're going to say try, and we'll say document write, and then we'll say customer, and then just to keep it simple, we'll go get customer and 5 like that. And then to catch the error, if it should be triggered, we're going to go catch EX for our exception, and we'll say if the exception is an instance of range error, then we want to perform certain calculations, otherwise we can perform other calculations. If we want to print out the error message that was triggered with it, we just go EX message plus, and if we reload it, you're going to see index must be greater than or equal to 0 or less than or equal to 4 pops up on the screen. So there you go, guys. That is an insane amount of information about JavaScript. Please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.